Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming in a new Elden Ring Things You Didn't Know episode. As we follow on from the new announcements with the Shadow of Erdtree and all the speculation with that, and our episode 40 episode where we focused on all the DLC, it's time to return to normal a little bit. We'll talk about some of the stuff we talked about in that DLC episode and some stuff we talked about in episode 9 that I've yet to follow up on. But as always, a huge thank you for getting involved and supporting this series. We've been doing it for a damn long time. It's pretty crazy. And it was certainly nice to have some new stuff to talk about that we can continue in today's episode. With that said though, let's begin. For our first topic of today's video then, we are here in front of another Malenia and Miquella statue. This is because we have some follow-ups to do with the Miquella faction and their unique sigil or symbol that actually shows up when using their special incantations, Ashes of War or otherwise. It's something we've talked about briefly in previous episodes where there's a weapon, Ash of War, that is tied to this faction, kind of revealing that it was tied to Miquella. But then really interesting things like the Beastmen and one of their sort of sorcery types actually having a kind of similar tree shape. How was Miquella and his faction associated to them? Now, as it turns out, there are other rare scenarios where you can actually see that symbol. For example, we have the bewitching branches here, which are a consumable item you can craft tied to Miquella. As you can see in the image, it has that tree thing in the background, sprouting and very clear in that. The Imperial Miquella is loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection. This implies that Miquella was able to kind of enforce that affection rather than it just being natural. He's almost got a magic ability to mind control in a way or generate those positive feelings. Through this item, you can also do the same to other AI, and that's quite useful. And when we use it, it also triggers the same symbol, that golden tree of abundance. Potentially that's what the divine Haligtree should look like. It's kind of cool though, if you look at the bottom left, actually over the image itself of the item, you can see the tree behind it there. Little sort of things like that you just don't see until you're really looking and paying attention. A lot of people comment about this one, so obviously I wanted to include it in the series. But interestingly, it also shows up when you're using Miquella's needle as part of the storyline where you go back on the frenzy ending, going to Placidusac's arena and sort of changing your fate and time. Once again, it appears to show up in a form. And finally, we have Cleanrot Knight Finley, a really important lore character, not actually directly talked about, only shown in this summon. She was able to, completely on her own, dragging Malenia all the way back from Caelid, all the way back to the Haligtree. So she's a very important character in terms of lore and relevance. And according to Isaac Browning, if we summon her, she'll even use a unique thing that has that symbol. Yes! Wow! The buff that she provides us with when she spawns in, she actually does the same totally unique symbol incantation, and it is that golden tree, the divine Haligtree. So as it turns out, this unique incantation, quite peculiar, is involved in incantations, it's involved in Ashes of War, potentially that sorcery of the Beast Woman, even involved in this summon. It's quite a rare one for us to be able to use, but clearly there are ways to see it throughout the story, referencing Miquella and that faction in really subtle and interesting ways. Next, we return to the character creator when making a new character for a quite unique one. This comes from DB in the comments, talking about how there are actually some interesting symbols and factions revealed when you're making a character, specifically when you're looking at the tattoo markings. So if I go all the way to the bottom, away from all of this like scarring stuff, at the bottom there's actually symbols of factions that I'm not sure I've ever seen in game otherwise. For example, what we're looking at right now seems to be Castle Sol and its eclipse symbol on my forehead. Now, something that's been revealed through some really interesting posts by Solovsky, someone we talked about in the series, they've been revealing what someone looks like under their mask. So take the white mask Vare, under his mask, he is quite an interesting character. And like many of the faction from that, as it turns out, they all have a sort of symbol on their face representing Mohg and his dynasty in that faction. But right next to that, number 23 here, that appears to me to be the divine Haligtree symbol that we've been looking and talking about. It's yet another place that it's actually just tucked away. It's a tattoo, and I guess some characters have this on their body somewhere if they're part of their respective faction. For example, next to that appears to be the Golden Order. This is really cool coming back to see after I've played the game for so many hundreds of hours and talked about the lore and looked into so many different things, knowing what these symbols mean. It's kind of surreal. Like, this is obviously the Omen symbol. I believe this will be Carrier with the sword and staff. Is this the Frenzy 3 fingers, I believe? Is that a black knife? This is the giant faction, the Red Flame Eye, I believe. We got the dragon stuff. Yeah, this is really cool. Some of them I don't recognize, like this one. But let me know if you recognize these things, if there's any interesting symbols we don't otherwise see in game. Moving on, we have a follow-up from our DLC-focused episode last time from Erdtree talking about Torrent and the ring that we use to actually summon this wonderful creature. Now, we see Torrent in the Shadow of Erdtree image, and there's a lot of like speculation throughout the whole playthrough, our original period with Elden Ring, before we saw that image as to who Torrent's former master was. I believe the leading theory was that it was Renna, aka the Frost Witch, the master and mentor of Ranni. But now it looks like it was either Marika or Miquella, and things are generally leaning on Miquella as it turns out. With that in mind, we took a look at the Spectral Steed whistle here and had a look at the gold ring itself with that sort of stitchwork pattern and the golden theme to it. A delicate gold work ring. A massive aspect of Miquella and his faction is unalloyed gold, and if we are assuming that Miquella is the rider in that image of Torrent, then it would make sense that that's how it's done. It's made from unalloyed gold, once again representing and referring to Miquella and his faction. Erdtree even made an interesting point about this. The ring being made from unalloyed gold could explain why, in the Frenzied Flame ending, it gets cast aside. The unalloyed gold prevents Torrent from being influenced by Frenzied Flame. This is referring again to what we talked about earlier in the episode with Placidusax and the arena, and how you can prevent the Frenzied Flame ending even though you've gone pretty far down that path by using Miquella's needle, the gold that we're talking about. It seems to be a resource that rejects this kind of corruption in all forms, including frenzy, which is why you can't take Torrent with you and is cast aside. Torrent rejecting the tarnished Frenzied Flame avatar, as it were. Although in that cinematic, you do hear Torrent kind of whistle out in kind of sadness before the ring is basically all but destroyed. So I'm not sure Torrent comes out of that all that well, but it is an interesting theory and reference again to the fact that this could be Miquella's unalloyed golden ring. Next, we return here to follow up on a thing in a couple episodes back, talking of course about the Dark Moon Greatsword and this icy version we have here. Now, one of the things that we talked about when we were discussing this weapon came from Isaac Browning, who was talking about how you can actually see into the blade if you are wearing this chest piece. There's sort of a strange interaction that works with that. Now, I didn't understand because the description wasn't very clear, but a few people have commented and explained further about what that actually meant and how to do it. As it turns out, using the Black Knife hood and armor, you can get this kind of see-through cloak, which obviously muffles your steps. It's a very important and known thing about this armor. But for some reason, it seems to affect some weapons and items in a specific way. So obviously inside of this blade, we have this ice kind of spine. But when I turn slightly, you can see that what's happening is the texture over the blade is being removed so that you can see the internals much clearer. If I were to come right up against the camera, you can actually see just past the side of my head there, all the way up the base, and how it's completely changing this weapon the way that it looks. It's a very random detail that this triggers and works with this weapon in this way, where we can use the shroud to see through and into things. And I do wonder what else it affects. It's such an interesting chess piece because it's involved in so many strange interactions, much like other certain chess pieces we've seen in this series. It's a cool thing to see though, and it's certainly something I didn't know and worthy of the series and a mention. It was Pierce Arna that went on to say that there's another effect that occurs with this, specifically in the case of the Nox Mirror Helm. As you can see, you can just barely see my eyes through that. They're a bit creepy looking when I'm wearing this. Apparently, this helmet disappears when we look through that shroud. And it seems to be true. Yes, a perfect example of the strange way that this shroud works. With the Nox Mirror Helm, it removes my internals, but what you can actually see on the other side is my eyes just floating there, and you can see they're actually blinking. That's horrifying, man. I can see my eyelashes through the back of my own head. What a strange interaction. If there's anything other than this, like this armor piece or other things, different interactions like that you know of, I would love to look at that in this series. It's so strange, such strange overlapping mechanics and the way they interact with each other, but it's cool to look at. But there you have it, another episode down and some more theories to do with lore and otherwise to talk about and discuss. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, if you have something that you think should be in the series that's not been included so far, then let me know in the comments. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. is goodbye.